Still got company, me.
What is it? You got Elvis?
Everyone thought it was running, but
It's running.
it goes lined up.
Oh, you got a bunch there.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Okay, are you all set? Oh. Okay, I will call the March 27th council meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call, Ms. LeBreau.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge.
Here.
Ms. Fay.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney.
Here.
Mr. Winograd.
Here.
And Mr. Williams.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. We are going to start. I'm going to make a motion to suspend the rules to introduce 3 proclamations. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. The first proclamation is really, really, really special. It's for our Lakpa Sherpa, and I will first say namaste from all of us, and we'll meet here, but I just want to say that you are referred to the Queen of the Mountains. Proclamation. This is a proclamation recognizing you for your 9th summit to Mount Everest. And I want to also say that there is, after I read the proclamation, you will be so motivated and moved that you will want to go to the GoFundMe page, world-record-everest-summits-and-K2. And if you need that, I will make sure that you get that information. So, Lakpa. Again, namaste. All right. So, I'm going to start. We have a proclamation also from the state. There is a Connecticut General Assembly proclamation. Look at this. It outdoes our proclamation a lot. They have more money, I guess. This is from the General Assembly, official citation introduced by Senator Beth Bayh, and Representative Andrew Fleischman, Representative Derek Slapp, and Representative Joe Varengia. Be it hereby known to all that the Connecticut General Assembly offers its sincerest congratulations to Lakpa Sherpa in recognition of your achievements for the West Hartford community and your record-breaking climbs to the summit of Mount Everest. You are a role model for persistence and determination. The entire membership extends its very best wishes on this memorable occasion and expresses the hope for continued success. Given 27th of March, 2018, at the State Capitol, Hartford, Connecticut, President Pro Tem Martin M. Looney and Speaker of the House, and the Secretary of State has also signed. So there you go. Wait, don't go anywhere. This is also the envelope for that. And then our proclamation, although smaller, a little more personal. Whereas the health and vitality of a community is reflected in the participation of its citizens in those activities that further the strength of the town, and whereas Lakpa Sherpa is a Nepalese Sherpa mountain climber and mountain guide, and whereas Lakpa Sherpa has climbed Mount Everest 8 times and has become the first Nepalese woman to climb and descend Everest successfully in year 2000, and whereas Lakpa Sherpa is the daughter of tea house owners who spent her childhood along a trekking route in an isolated village in the Himalayas and received no formal training on mountain climbing. And whereas Lakpa Sherpa has lived in West Hartford for more than 15 years with her 2 daughters, Sunny and Shiny, and son Nima, and will summit Mount Everest for the 9th time in May 2018 in hopes of breaking her own record once again. And whereas Lakpa Sherpa, the queen of Mount Everest, feels her strongest while on the mountain and through her courage and endurance climbs on behalf of women across the world. Now therefore be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby recognize and celebrate Lakpa Sherpa on her upcoming summit of Mount Everest and extend best wishes on her 9th ascent. And we wish you all the best and much success. So. And one second, don't go anywhere. And you are going to bring a Town of West Hartford pin and put it on that beautiful banner that you put up there last time you were there on your 8th ascent. So there you go. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you so much. That's
amazing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. All the best.
Wow.
Wow, right?
Wow is-
Wow is right. So
Wow is right.
GoFundMe, world-record-everest-summits-and-K2. And if you need anything, you can contact me or contact Brittany Stevenson in the office, and we will get it to you, or I think Essie has it too. So, and actually, this is a great segue into the next proclamation. Jen, want to meet me up here? So this is an incredible story of an amazing woman with internal strength and external strength that really actually humbles us all. And this is actually the Women History Month, the month of March. And so Lakpa is an example of a historic woman setting new records and inspiring so many of us. And then we just saw yesterday Linda Brown, third grader from Topeka, Kansas, at the center of the landmark Brown versus Board of Education, who died yesterday at 75 years old, a third grader that changed the direction of our country's history. So on this proclamation, I would like to present it to Jen DeColomatos, who is our director of Noah Webster House and also the West Hartford Historical Society. So, whereas, come closer. Whereas women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our nation in countless recorded and unrecorded ways, and whereas women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social role in every sphere of life of the nation by constituting a significant portion of the labor force working inside and outside of the home, and whereas women have played a unique role throughout the history of the nation by providing the majority of volunteer labor force of the nation, and women were particularly important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our nation, and whereas women of every race, class, and ethnic background served as early leaders in the forefront of every major social change movement and have served our country courageously in the military, and whereas women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, the industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements, especially the peace movement, which create a more fair and just society for all. And whereas despite these contributions, the role of women in history has been consistently overlooked and undervalued in the literature, teaching, and study of history. Now therefore be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby recognize and celebrate the numerous contributions made by women and proclaim the month of March 2018 as Women's History Month and call upon all citizens to engage in programs, ceremonies, and activities that honor women. It's a little late in the month, but hopefully you can make it up. And it can go into next month, too. Thank you so much. And Jen, I thank you. Do you want to say a couple words, or you don't have to? You don't have to.
Well, I feel very humbled to accept this award on behalf of all women in history, so.
You can share with Lakpa. Thank you. Jen humbles us all too, because she makes great contributions for our community, and we appreciate all that you do. And then we have one more proclamation. Helen, meet me up there. We have been blessed with so many wonderful leaders in our community that have made remarkable contributions, and Paul Glover is one that we will sorely miss. And again, this proclamation is for Paul Glover, whereas the health and vitality of a community is reflected in the participation of its citizens in those activities that further the strength of the town, and whereas Paul Glover was a longtime West Hartford resident and graduate of the University of Hartford, earning a master's degree in engineering, and was employed at B.F. Goodrich and Chandler Evans as vice president for marketing and business development prior to his retirement, and whereas Paul Glover volunteered for more than 40 years as a coach in the West Hartford Girls Soccer League, both recreation and travel divisions, volunteered to coach in the West Hartford Women's Soccer Club since its inception in 1995, and was president of the board of the West Hartford Girls Soccer League, and whereas Paul Glover was a veteran of the U.S. Air Corps and fought in Korea, and also a member of the Veterans Commission, and whereas Paul Glover served for more than 20 years on the board of directors of Field of Dreams, West Hartford's Community Soccer Foundation, and due to his skillful management, facilitated the town's purchase of 8 acres on Flatbush Avenue from the Goodrich Corporation in 2002, and helped raise more than $600,000 to renovate the land into soccer fields. And whereas the soccer complex was named in honor of Paul Glover in 2015 in appreciation of his myriad of contributions, and whereas Paul Glover served his community, his state, and his country with honor and will be remembered by all who knew him. Now therefore be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council of West Hartford and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby extend sincere appreciation to Paul Glover for his dedication and commitment to the town of West Hartford, and in his memory proclaim March 27th, 2018 as Paul Glover Day in West Hartford. And Helen actually worked so closely with him, and I don't know if you want to say a couple words or... There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very briefly, I was privileged to lead a team of people to name the fields in Paul's honor a few years ago, and that was a wonderful experience to be able to do that while he was still with us. And for him to appreciate that and his family was a great blessing to me and to all of our members of our soccer community. I was also able to attend his funeral last Saturday, and one of my soccer colleagues, Steve Wilbert, said about Paul that what he learned from Paul was the difference between being involved in something and being committed to something. And Paul was a committed volunteer. He was committed to West Hartford, he was committed to soccer, and he was committed to his country. So I just want to thank you for this on behalf of his family. Thanks.
Thank you, Helen, and that was beautiful. Very, very well said. Thank you. All right, so 4, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move approval of the minutes of the Town Council meeting March 12, 2018, and the public hearing of 35 Ringgold Street, 34 Crescent Street on February 27, 2018.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. The next item is the public forum, and that is a chance for you, the public, to address the council on items that are on this agenda that are not subject to a public hearing. You would need to state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes to speak. Is there anyone here that is signed up? No? Is there anyone here that would like to speak to something on the agenda? No? Okay. Number 6, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we place items 15 and 16 on the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 7, Ms. Kerrigan.
Is there unfinished business?
Well, that's just a...
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for that distinction. I move adoption of a resolution authorizing the town manager to enter into a lease agreement with Rockledge Tavern LLC.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Hart, can you enlighten us?
Thank you, Mayor. So the council, you took this item under suspense at your February 13th meeting, so you may recall the item from that session. But we're seeking your approval of our lease agreement with Rockledge Tavern. And this is the entity that will be operating the restaurant, snack bar, and related facilities at Rockledge Golf Course. We selected the vendor through a competitive bidding process. They currently operate the Beachland Tavern and the Park Tavern as well. Really excited about their vision for the facility. They are planning to make approximately $300,000 in improvements at the restaurant, and we really think that they'll be able to do a tremendous job for us. Looking at the cover memo we prepared here, the lease will run an initial term from this past January through 2025 with the option of 3 additional 5-year renewals based on mutual agreement. Looking at some of the financials, the lessee, Rockledge Tavern, they will pay the town a monthly rent of $5,000. Not during the first 3 months, but after that. And this monthly rent will increase $100 each January 1st of the term. And in addition, the lease includes a profit-sharing component. Well, the lessee will pay the town an amount equivalent to 6% of net annual sales for revenues between $1 and $2 million. And these terms compare quite favorably to the lease we had in place with the prior operator. So I'd like to credit our staff who worked on this, Helen Rubino-Turco, Peter Privatera, and others. Again, we're very excited about the new operator coming in and seeking the council's support for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any questions before we vote? No? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 8, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move
Let me just say, if you would like to, you don't have to stay if you don't want to. And your kid, it's up to you.
because the most exciting part is over, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It
I'm just
was
saying,
you.
we won't be offended if you leave.
Yeah.
Okay, number 8, Ms.
You
Kerrigan.
have training to do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we set for public hearing on May 8th, 2018 at 7:15 in the Legislative Chamber and refer to TP&Z and DRAC, an application on behalf of Delmar West Hartford LLC seeking approval of an amendment to Special Development District 140 located at 1 Memorial Drive and known as Delmar. The amendment requests changes to the approval, architecture, and landscaping to permit the elimination of an architectural rooftop mechanical screen, the elimination of decorative trees, and the addition of a seasonal vestibule enclosure for the artisan restaurant.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Number 9, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we adopt a resolution supporting participation in the Sustainable Connecticut Municipal Certification Program.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Hart, would you like to discuss?
Thank you, Mayor. And I would ask our Director of Plant and Facilities, Mr. Palmer, to come forward. He'll provide a couple of additional comments to my presentation here. Sustainable Connecticut, this is a voluntary certification program. It's new. It's being sponsored by the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and Eastern Connecticut State University. And it's similar to programs that operate in other states around the country. And really what it's designed to is to promote best practices that relate to sustainability. And municipalities apply for certification under this program. There's essentially a checklist of activities that span the entire gamut of municipal operations, as well as arts and culture and other community-wide activities. Our applications, if you approve this submission, our application would be reviewed and scored by the review committee. And if we meet the criteria, we would receive this designation. I see this as beneficial in a couple different respects. Number one, it would recognize our long-standing efforts to promote sustainability across the organization and across the community, but also present us with something of a roadmap of looking at best practices across the state as well as the region and even nationally as we move forward in the future with energy improvements, a whole variety of sustainability-related activities. So why don't I pause there and ask Mr. Palmer if there are any Palmer if there's any additional detail he'd like to add.
I think Mr. Hart did a great job explaining the program. I think that we already do a lot of these things that are these actions that are listed in this program. There's 9 different categories, and then there's actions within each one of those categories. We're already doing a lot of those. A lot of putting this together will just be gathering information and putting it in a format so it can be reviewed and certified by the organization. But as the town manager mentioned, it does give us a roadmap for future sustainability projects and ideas and how we want to proceed. It also gives us access to all the other towns in the state and across the country and to the methods that they're using for best practices and sustainable initiatives. So it's really going to help us to develop our staff internally, as well as provide a benefit to the town economic. There's also some potential grants associated with this program and other opportunities economically to enhance the town. So I think it's a wide, comprehensive program. It just doesn't focus on buildings and energy. It's on the build-outs of towns, the planning, the transportation, multiple elements that all contribute to sustainability and a viable, livable community, which I think West Hartford already is, but it's a matter of just documenting what we have done and accomplished in this town.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Any comments or questions? Mr. Barnes?
Just one question. Does this commit us as a town to do anything, take any action, expend any funds in any areas? If you know.
It doesn't commit us to doing anything. It just, again, it's voluntary. There's no commitment on our part to complete the process if we get to a certain point and do this. This initial period is for a 3-year certification, and then we go through the process again, redocumenting. They expect that they will tweak the program based on the performance of the initial response towns. At this point, there's 30 towns that have signed up for the initial certification. And they expect a few more to join by the time the enrollment deadline is May 1st, I believe, yes.
Okay, and the 30 towns here in Connecticut
Correct.
that are part of the program?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Sorry, I was just saying your neighbors, Mike was on, that's all. That's all.
thought mine wasn't on.
No.
I didn't know what was
All right, Mr. Sweden.
I just want to thank the town manager for his efforts on this. So we had a very good conversation about this at the last Admin and Technology Committee, as well as Director Palmer for his big efforts on this. This is a really great first step to helping make sure the town is sustainable long term and potentially come up with some ways to help have the town save some money. So thank you guys for your efforts on this, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for your leadership on this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. When I went to the kickoff event upstairs, and it actually was here, reaching out to towns, and I was looking at the slides. I'm like, yeah, we do that, we do that, we do that, and will be good to be recognized and understand and have a roadmap for how to proceed. So, and also, I think using other towns as resources of what we can do and maybe even do together. So that'll be great. All right, thank you, Mr. Sweeney, for your leadership, too. I appreciate that, and Mr. Hart for his leadership, and, of course, Mr. Palmer for all you do for the town. Anything else? All right, with that, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Number 10, Mrs. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we refer to TP&Z a resolution authorizing the execution of an easement in favor of Eversource Energy.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. We're up to you, Mr. Hart. Reports from the town manager.
I'm sorry, Mayor, just a question regarding the previous item. So that was a referral to TP&Z? Yes, good, thank you. So I'd like to distribute copies of my report.
Thank you.
And Mayor, the last couple of pages are for you when we get to the upcoming events and announcements section on page 3. But leading off with council business and meetings, so your budget review process is moving along. I've got the schedule here of your upcoming meetings and public hearings. We've got a couple more this week. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., Community Planning will meet. Thursday at 8 a.m., Human Services Committee. Then we've got a public hearing. Public Safety will begin its review on April 8th. Finance and Budget has a couple meetings remaining, and you can see the other public hearings listed here as well. So the budget process is moving along. Next, your ad hoc subcommittee on economic development will meet at 5:30 later this week on the 29th, also in room 312. We're going to talk about the draft community engagement report regarding the Yukon property that our consulting team and staff team have prepared. And then we'll also provide a staff report on other economic development projects around the town. Moving on, I'm very sad to report that Mr. Stephen Tedford, who was the service response manager in plant and facility services, he passed away on March 21st. Steve had worked for the town the past 10 years and had worked for Pratt & Whitney Aircraft for another 20 years prior. Steve was a longtime resident of Tolland, very involved with coaching youth sports and other activities. So certainly our condolences to Steve's family and friends, and we will miss him, certainly miss him as one of our colleagues. Moving on, this past weekend we had our second annual How-To Festival at Noah Webster Library. Drew almost 3,400 visitors. We had 40 presenters sharing information on a whole variety of neat things, ranging from gardening to belly dancing, which, yeah, I should have stopped by that session. But kudos to all the staff.
Are you a good belly dancer?
I've been working on it. You know, it's great core exercise. Yeah, really good for that. So kudos to our staff and all the volunteers for their hard work there. Boulevard bike lanes, we talked about this, I believe, in the last community planning meeting, but the engineering division plans to repave a section of Boulevard. This is from Trout Brook Drive to Quaker Lane South this coming spring. And as part of this project, and in accordance with our bicycle facilities plan, which you've adopted, we're going to install bike lanes in this section. So it would be a 5-foot bike lane in the eastbound direction. That's where it will run. We did review the concept with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission, and they concurred with the approach. A couple of other things. Golf season is here. It seems like we had snow on the ground just not so long ago, but Rockledge and Buena Vista should be open by the end of this week. So folks who are looking to get out there and swinging the clubs. So spring also brings yard waste collection with it, correct? So that's going to start off the week of April 9th, and we'll have a collection 1 week in April, 1 week in May, the 7th through the 11th, and 1 week in June as well, the 4th through the 8th. And then lastly, with respect to outside agencies, Public Safety Night. The West Hartford Exchange Club, they've been doing this for many years. They're going to hold their annual Public Safety Night on Wednesday, April 4th at 5:15 at the VFW Hannon Hatch Post. And they will be honoring Firefighter of the Year, and this year we'll be recognizing Apparatus Operator Daniel Syme, as well as a Police Officer of the Year, Police Officer Daniel Bedford. Council members are certainly welcome and encouraged to attend. We do have our public hearing later that night, and want to thank the Exchange Club for moving things around a little bit so that we have time to attend this session. That completes my report, Mayor. Happy to take questions council members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any questions? Mr. Barnes?
One comment, one question, one comment. So with respect to your report and the Boulevard bike lanes, as you mentioned, we did discuss this in committee, and I just want to make sure part of that process was going to be meeting with the neighbors on the south side of the street to make sure that they were aware that the plan was to remove parking from that side of the street?
Yes.
And do you know if that's been done or
No,
when it will be done?
not as of yet, no. But
Okay.
we will certainly conduct that engagement effort.
Okay, so that'll be done?
Yes.
Okay, great. Second, so last week, the Board of Education took action to change a federal holiday from Columbus Day to Indigenous Persons Day. It was something that's received a lot of commentary and outreach from the community over the last week. came about, I think it started in February, if I recall, at the Board of Ed meeting when the issue was first raised and discussed. They agreed to table the discussion till their March meeting, which they did. They resumed their discussion at their March meeting and ultimately voted 5-2 to make that change, changing the name of the federal holiday along party lines. So the 5 Democrats voted to make the change, and the 2 Republicans voted against making that change. And since that happened last Tuesday night, I am aware that the town has received many phone calls from angry residents about that change. I know I've received calls, emails, as have Mary and Chris and maybe some others in the room as well. People are upset. They're upset for a number of reasons. One, that they feel like there was no notice about the decision, that they didn't have an opportunity to come out and speak on the topic. 2, some people are wondering whether it's the best use of the Board of Ed's time to engage in, this type of discussion when certainly I think many would agree that there are more important or pressing issues to be taken up by the board, and also feel like it was an effort to change or alter history. And so with the outreach, with the news coverage, with the talk radio coverage that's been going on over the last week, I want to take the opportunity to raise it, but also to ask you, the town manager, if you've been in touch with the superintendent, the school board, the Board of Ed, or other people in the community about this topic.
All we have done through my office is just let the board office know that we had received these complaints and concerns.
Okay. And did the town respond to any of the people that reached out, or were they all directed to the schools?
We directed folks to the district.
Okay. And was the town aware that the school board was going, or the Board of Education was going to be taking up that issue over the last couple months?
I think the superintendent had mentioned it to me, did not know the timing or the scheduling of that discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think just to follow up on Councilman Barnes's statement, I'd just like to, I think now's the appropriate time since the subject came up, but I think if I could, through you, Mr. Manager, just talk to Mr. Allaire about some of the communications we've had so that I understand. And just to give the public some background, one of the issues that Mr. Allaire and I, actually the council as a whole, inquired about in response to, I think, the public outcry about the change at the school level was whether or not the board had the authority to do what it did. Now, Pat, you and I think, to be fair, view it differently. I think the Board of Ed created a new holiday, and I think you are of the position that it did not. It simply changed the name of a holiday which is to be observed. Is that fair?
I'm not even sure that they went that far.
Okay.
They, on one document, namely the school calendar,
Right.
changed the name that they refer to that holiday by. I think in one email I said they might as well have adopted a resolution calling me Shirley.
Right.
It has the same legal effect. It doesn't rise to the level of changing the name of the holiday because we will all still continue to observe Columbus Day. That is the state and federal holiday. They've changed the wording on one document.
All right, so I just want to, for the public, walk through the analysis, your analysis, so that I understand and the public understands it. Okay. And first, as an initial matter, it's my understanding the Board of Ed did not cite any specific bylaw in making the change. They just made it without sort of a context. Is that accurate?
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. So in our discussions, it's my understanding that, fair to say, the bylaws of the Board of Ed are the governing document that set forth its authority and scope of power, and on the town side, we have the charter, right?
Not entirely. The
Okay.
Board of Ed is also empowered by state statute and federal statute to undertake certain actions.
Okay, fair enough. And in both those documents, the charter and the bylaws, and even indeed state statute by reference, as you referenced, there's reference to legal holidays or state holidays, right?
Legal holidays, I think, is the term used consistently.
Okay. And it's our understanding, your understanding, and the court's understanding that that term references us to a specific state statute 1-4, General Statutes 1-4, which sets forth various holidays that are legally recognized, fair to say?
That's correct.
And one of them is Columbus Day.
Yes?
And Indigenous Peoples' Day is not recognized on that statute.
No.
All right. Okay. Now, I had the pleasure of going through some of the Board of Education bylaws. And I focused in on the calendar sections that authorize the Board of Ed to set calendars. I'm sure you're familiar with them, section 6100, 6200. And in our discussions, from what I understood, and from also reviewing the bylaws of the Board of Ed, the Board of Ed has the authority to set a calendar with 180 days of school. And it has the discretion whether or not to observe holidays recognized by the state, except for those in December or January. And in terms of the calendar, it also has the discretion to call off school in terms of a snowstorm emergency or for safety reasons. And that's my understanding. In reviewing the bylaws, I didn't see any specific authority for the Board of Education to either, using my terminology, create a new holiday, or using your terminology, to rename a holiday. And so what I'm asking is if my understanding based on reviewing the bylaws is consistent with your understanding.
I haven't reviewed their bylaws.
Okay.
The question of their bylaws has not been raised with me.
Okay.
I would point out that the distinction between our charter and their bylaws is that our charter can only be be amended or revised by virtue of a charter revision commission, et cetera. Their bylaws, much like the council's standing rules, can be amended, can be revised, can be ignored by action of the Board of Ed. Mm-hmm. So there is a bit of a distinction to be made there in terms of how enforceable or mandatory, I guess is the better word, those bylaws are as opposed to the charter.
Okay, so when you say the bylaws can be ignored, are you saying the Board of Ed can exercise authority outside of its bylaws?
I think the Board of Ed is entitled to exercise all of the authority granted to boards of education under state statute and federal statute. They use their bylaws as much as we use our code of ordinances. Their bylaws are sort of a hybrid of policies and procedures and internal policies and policies for dealing with students. So they're much like our code of ordinances, and they can change them. I don't know if there is a specific provision, because I haven't looked, that says we can waive a bylaw, we can act inconsistent with our bylaws, we can go beyond our bylaws, we can cover subjects that aren't covered by our bylaws. Certainly, I think they are entitled, if there is an issue that comes before them which isn't addressed specifically by their bylaws, but is within the purview legally of what a Board of Ed can do, they're entitled to address that.
Okay. And then in terms of what a Board of Education can do legally, that would be set forth in the bylaws and or the federal or state statutes that govern the Board of Ed. Mm-hmm. So then it is fair to say, I think, based on our discussion here, that if the Board of Education is not authorized by state or federal statute or the bylaws as they exist at the time the Board of Ed is acting to either create a holiday or change the name of the holiday, they don't then have the authority to do that. Is that a fair characterization?
I'm reluctant to say yes or no, simply because sitting here, I can't determine whether there is any bylaw that says otherwise. Certainly, the powers of boards of education are very broad.
Right.
And I can't think of a state statute which prohibits them from doing that. And they do have the power to set the school calendar. So within that power, if it is their decision to call a school holiday, which is, by the way, a date set by statute, it's the same date as Columbus Day, so they haven't created a new holiday, that's why I say that. If they choose to call it something different, I'm not sure that that is inconsistent with any power that they're granted by state law or
Okay.
federal law.
Okay, so I think we're on the same page then. I think we're on the same page in terms of what I'm hearing is that unless there is some provision that would then enable the Board of Ed to act in that fashion by taking that step, they would not have that authority. They have to have some authority. In other words, the Board of Ed, its power in what it is tasked to do is set forth affirmatively in the law. It is not a setup whereby the Board of Ed has all authority, save for what is specifically set forth. Is that fair characterization?
I believe state law generally says that we have the powers, we as municipalities and they as a Board of Ed have the power to do that which is specifically enumerated and that which is necessary to the implementation of those powers
Okay.
which are
All
enumerated.
right, okay, so fair enough.
So it's a little broader than that. I don't want to be so cut and dried that somebody hangs me with that sentence
No.
5 years from now.
No, yeah, no one's trying to hang you.
No.
Okay. And then just in terms of sort of the interpretation of 1-4, you brought to my attention the fact that a school board has the discretion to hold class on a legally recognized holiday, say for December and January, subject to limitations. And one of those is that the school would have to hold a suitable non-sectarian educational program in observance of such holiday. And the reason I bring that up, Mr. Allaire, is that because it seems to me that, hypothetically, if the school board, as it presently, the calendar is constituted, were to hold school on Indigenous Peoples' Day, it would have to teach a suitable program in observance of that holiday. Now, I think there's an argument to be made that such a curriculum in observance of Indigenous Peoples' Day would be material different from Columbus Day, which is the holiday actually set out in the statute.
And that's why I'd have to disagree with you on that.
Okay.
Because the statute says we observe as a matter of state law Columbus Day. And that is the holiday which, if class was to be held on that day, which it isn't, which is how we got here, they would have to do a suitable, appropriate, non-sectarian program about the state holiday, not what they've chosen to name it. I think it would be hard to engage, at least at some levels, in a discussion of Columbus and the legacy of Columbus without talking about his impact on the indigenous peoples of North America. But I think if you strictly read the statute, it would mean you'd have to do teaching about Columbus on Columbus Day, no matter what the Board of Ed chooses to call that on the calendar.
So I think we're all on I'm on the same page with you with a lot of these issues now. But okay, conversely, you've told me, however, that the town could, if it desired, call a holiday and close its buildings. Is that right? It has the authority to do that?
Yes, I think, yes. The question that I was asked and that I answered was, could the town, or I'm not sure if it was could the town, or it was who in the town could close town buildings? And the answer is that town buildings run by the town administration run by the town, run by you at the end of the day, could choose to locally recognize Noah Webster Day or Viking Appreciation Day, since really, let's face it, they were the Europeans who first got to North America, but that we could do some such celebration or honor and close town buildings on that day. That wouldn't make it a legal holiday under state law. It would make it a locally recognized holiday.
Okay. So then the dichotomy, as I see it, based upon this conversation, is that we know the town has authority to have a holiday that it observes. There's a question, I think, based upon our discussion here, as to whether or not the Board of Ed has the authority to either change the name of a holiday or create a holiday. It's sort of, I forgot the expression Ron used to use, angels on the
Head of a pin?
Yeah, it's that metaphor. So and now I would bring this to Mr. Manager, is that since there's a question here, I wonder if it would be appropriate to refer the issue of whether, the town should have a resolution reaffirming Columbus Day to a subcommittee of some sort, so that issue can be more fully fleshed out and analyzed. And so that's what I guess the question would be, if we were to do that, what committee would study that issue?
Clarification on the question.
Yeah.
So that would be a resolution that would just impact the municipal organization?
Yeah, what I think it would be is a resolution, essentially, I think what we would have to do is investigate whether the Board of Education had the authority at the time that it passed the calendar, changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, whether it had the authority at that time to do that, and then based upon that outcome, if the result was in the negative, a resolution essentially articulating that fact publicly as sort of a reaffirmation that Columbus Day is the day that is observed on the second Monday of October, something along those lines. It's sort of like we have to, it seems to me, hearing all this, there's still some investigation that has to be done, particularly given the concerns of town residents on the issue. And because of that, I think it's ripe for some further review, I would think, by some subcommittee. And that's my question to you.
I thought Mr. Allaire has explained that, at least in his view, that the Board of Ed has the discretion to make the decision it made. The board also has its own legal counsel. I think I would just advise the council to respect the board's jurisdiction for issues that fall under its purview. If the council had an interest in passing a resolution regarding the town government and the fact that Columbus Day, is a holiday we appreciate, et cetera, I would think that would fall under the council's discretion.
My understanding, based on the discussion with Mr. Allaire, is that we don't know whether or not the Board of Ed had the authority to act as it did. And that's why I think it needs further investigation.
The council, I would just strongly caution against that. I think it's important for the council, in your role as a legislative body, to recognize and respect where the board has jurisdiction, over its operations and over its affairs. I'm sure that issue is important to you as well. If the board was looking at an issue that fell under the council's purview. So that's my advice. That's my counsel. Maybe Mr. Allaire would like to chime in as well. If the council ultimately wants to take this further, that's your decision. But I would counsel against it.
I think, Mr. Hart, we're on the same page. I think the issue that I'm interested in is whether, in fact, the Board of Ed did have the jurisdiction to make the determination that it made. That is an issue that does not seem clear to me. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I agree with you that jurisdictions between the two bodies should be respected. It's just not clear to me that, in fact, the Board of Ed had the jurisdiction to do what it did in the first place.
If I may, I think the problem with the way you framed the question and the way I think you propose to frame the investigation, you are in essence asking for investigation of something which is of absolutely no legal effect. So I mean, bluntly, what they did is meaningless legally. Let me just finish. So by virtue of the fact that what they did is legally meaningless, I'm not sure that there's any action to investigate. There is no one who is affected in a legal sense by the fact that on Columbus Day they will be observing a holiday. They are. They choose to call it something different. No one is impacted by that decision. So when you talk about jurisdiction to take action, the action that they took is a legal nullity. I mean, I don't know how many different ways I can say it, but it's like a council adopting a resolution to say today's Tuesday. Well, great. You did. So what? There's no legal effect to that. So if I went to the law to do research on do they have the power to do that, what would I be searching for? The power to do what? They did nothing.
I think there's a lot of members of the public that would disagree with you, Mr. Earlier, respectfully. It's a substantial material policy decision. Whether or not the Board of Ed had the authority to take on and change a legally recognized holiday onto itself, I think is a policy decision that is of material consequence to this town. And we should be very sure that the Board of Ed is acting within its authority. In my opinion, I may be alone, I don't think I am, but in my opinion, that when it does that with the correct legal authority. And it just seems to me that it's not clear. And I could go on and on about why I think policy-wise there's a reason to question the change. Legally, you have the opinion that it's immaterial, but I think that it is material, at least in my view. So that's my position, and that's why I'm asking for the remedy that I'm asking for.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Fay?
Yes, if I may, and with all due respect, don't want to beat a dead horse here, but irrespective of the legal, whether it's legal for them to do this or not, I wanted to give everyone a little bit of a flavor for the context of the complaints that we've been receiving because of this change, and I know you personally received one telephonically. So I'm not going to call
Actually,
it.
my office did. I did not, so
Okay.
I don't know what was said.
Okay, all right. But the flavor of them are, how could the board do this? How will it impact my children? It's called a different day. Columbus Day means something, especially if you happen to be an American Italian. Now that's gone. We already have Indigenous Peoples' Day in August. Isn't it duplicative? Why weren't we informed? How come these things are happening in schools with our children without parental consent? So you can call it legal, or you can call it process, or you can call it a bunch of different things. But if I had $1 for the amount of time that I've spent on this in person, telephonically, and emails about this, I don't know that it's elevated to the board of how serious this is taken, this change, by our residents. So whether it's legal or not, we can debate that till the cows come home. Whether they had the authority or not, I just think with something that could be viewed as controversial or upsetting to a particular segment of our population, it should have had more input, it should have had more attention drawn to it, and it just felt from the input that I'm getting from folks that it was just kind of slammed through. Here's another, political type of thing being done to our children without parental involvement or the chance to discuss it.
And I'm actually glad you raised that point, because I think Councilor Barnes did sort of briefly mention this, but I think something that's lost here is that there was a process. The board didn't just slam this through, and people may not have been aware of the process, but it doesn't mean there wasn't one. I'm led to believe that at least one member of the board was approached last fall with this proposal, spoke with the administration about it. It was suggested that it should be addressed in the context of adopting the school calendar. At the first reading of the school calendar at the meeting in February that Councilor Barnes mentioned, the issue was raised again. A question was posed about whether or not there was enough interest, if you will, by the public to make it something that should be discussed. One of the student representatives left that board meeting where the item was tabled, went to, I don't know which of the websites, but went to a website, started a petition, which garnered some 600 and some odd signatures in support of the change. There were something like 25 letters sent to the board, all but a few of which were in support of the change. It came back to a second board meeting at which the petition, the letters, and 6 members of the public spoke in support of the change. In between the two meetings, Ms. Newton wrote about the issue so that it was publicly raised. And at that meeting, the board, having essentially heard very little opposition, if any, vocally, and a great deal of support, voted for the change. So there was a process, and only afterwards have people become upset. It is not the first time that we have had a process, either by this body or by the Board of Ed, which has gotten people upset after the fact, who have said, well, how come I didn't know about this? And the answer is usually that, for whatever reason, you missed it. But there was a public discussion here. The board did do it, and I respectfully submit that if to the extent that it is a policy decision, rather than a legal decision or putting the legal issues aside, if it's a policy decision, that's what the Board of Ed selected for. And they made the policy decision. Frankly, I think there are probably 6 to 10 good reasons not to make the same policy decision. And I could sit here and articulate them for the next hour, but it's not for us. It's a Board of Ed matter. And I think the debate should continue at the Board of Ed.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it was silly that the Board of Education did this. I think it's silly how much time we have spent on it tonight. I know there's been a significant back and forth between Mr. Williams and Mr. Allaire about this. I'm just curious on the matter of wasting time, how much time your office has spent on this issue over the past week, answering various questions about this, Mr. Allaire.
First of all, my office exists to answer these questions, so we're happy to do it at any time. Let's just get that. I never view them as a waste of time. I've received, I think, 4 emails from members of the council, which I've responded to. It's probably taken 3 hours plus or minus, because I have put the things down, pick them back up, and so it's taken a little bit of time, but I think it may be 3 hours plus or minus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In response to my colleague, Mr. Dodge, you're entitled to your opinion about wasting time. There's an issue that's important to a lot of people, including myself. I think Indigenous people, as well as Columbus, should be celebrated in our schools. There's a major concern that by replacing Columbus with Indigenous people, there's a false narrative that's being put on our impressionable students that somehow Columbus is an antagonist and indigenous people are protagonists, when reality at the time, there was a lot of terrible things that were going on. And I think an objective review of history is really what we need in our schools. I think a lot of people are concerned of where does this end? In the chaos at the Board of Education. I mean, my goodness, think about the fact that just a few years ago, our former high school had this beautiful, beautiful chieftain head in the middle of center court at Conard High School. It was in honor of chieftains. Now the Board of Ed is creating Indigenous Peoples Day after it removed the chieftains. Whether or not the Board of Education is acting within its authority is important to a lot of people. I don't think it's a waste of time. In fact, as you know, I would like to contribute more time to that very issue. So I respectfully disagree. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Barnes.
Just wanted a couple comments. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we've heard a lot from residents over the last week and even before the vote, and I wouldn't characterize the time as wasted. I certainly wouldn't characterize the discussion as silly. I do disagree with the action that the Board of Education took, but they did it, and there are residents in town who are upset about it. And as counselors, we are, facilitating and highlighting those issues to move it forward if possible. If there's something that we could do, and as a body we decided to do, what our options would be. One issue that was left open at the last Board of Ed meeting last week, I believe the superintendent was going to look into if there was any legal impact of the change with respect to the teacher's contract and whether their days off were identified specifically as Columbus Day and whether that would have an impact, whether the day could be a day where the teachers went to school and the students went to school. And I believe that's a motion that they're going to take up for consideration in future meetings. So there are some legal issues around it and what rights the teachers have, and certainly if the students one day find out that it's a day that they're going to be going to school as a result of this, I think that they would have an opinion about that as well. So those are still some open issues. I think the other issue with respect to jurisdiction, is an open one. I think it's worth continuing to discuss, within this body, if there is something, whether it is a resolution, whether the action that was taken was something that they were authorized to do. I respect comedy and having, different areas of jurisdiction, but if they acted outside of theirs and there is some action that the town council can take, I would want to know if in fact that is the case, and what as a group we wanted to do about that, and not just, leave the issue alone and let it lie, particularly in the face of, our residents coming to us saying how upset they are about it. To Mr. Allaire's point about notice, yes, people find out about things after the fact. It could be in the newspaper, it could be reported. People's lives are busy, all of our lives are busy. They didn't know, they found out about it after, and they're raising their concerns, and we just want to make sure that their concerns are heard. So I don't think the process is silly or a waste of time. I think the action was a waste of time, but now that has consequences, and that has consequences for the rest of us. And certainly what Mr. Williams did here tonight, the time that he spent researching all of these documents, actually being on the radio and being interviewed about these issues and responding to constituent emails and phone calls is, I think that's a tremendous effort. And I applaud his effort on behalf of the people of town for him to take the time to do that, and I respect him for that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Anybody else? Remember, we're on the town manager's report.
Oh, are we?
That was all at the town manager's report. Anything else for Mr. Hart? Okay. Announcements. Move Buddha ranks West Hartford number 6 in nation. Move Buddha is an online information and resource website that helps people who are moving to a new location. Recently ranked West Hartford number 6 in the nation among the 50 most popular mid-sized cities to relocate to. That is remarkable, and we should recognize that. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Remembrance. Join us Tuesday, April 3rd, as we remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the day he gave his last speech before his assassination in 1968. The event will take place at Blueback Square at 5 p.m. with community art project followed by a reading of I've Been to the Mountaintop by 50 people of all ages and all walks of life. The event is free and open to all. Stand Up to Cancer Charity Walk. The University of Hartford's chapter of Alpha Phi Omega will be hosting a 5K charity run walk on Saturday, April 7th to benefit Stand Up to Cancer. The race will begin at 9 a.m. on Isham Road in Blueback Square. Check-in and last-minute registrations will be available at 8 a.m. Register to walk or run for this event by going to www.apo, those are caps, and I don't know if they need to be, 5k.com. Webster's War of the Words. Ms. Matos is in the audience. Ms. Matos is in the audience here. And so this is great. Please join us for a celebration of words and language on Saturday, April 14, 2018, at the Noah Webster House in West Hartford Historical Society, 9th Annual Webster's War of the Words. The signature fundraiser comes complete with dinner, beer, and wine, fabulous silent and live auction items, and the main attraction, the word-based game show. The event will take place from 6 to 9 at Congregation Beth Israel, 701 Farmington Avenue. Advance purchase tickets are $60. After April 11th, all tickets are $75. Tickets are available at noahwebster.yapcity.com or call 860-521-5362, extension 10. This is a great event benefiting, obviously, the Noah Webster House and the West Hartford Historical Society. I have purchased a table. If anybody wants to go, please, please, please buy your tickets and go. It is a lot of fun. Thank you, Jen, for being here. And then I'm going to end the way I started. GoFundMe for Lakba Sherpa, 8-time Mount Everest climber, will be summiting her for the 9th time, May 2018. Her GoFundMe is, again, https://www.gofundme.com world-record-everest-summits-and-K2. Remarkable, remarkable story. All right, now we are on to reports from Corporation Counsel.
Well, I had a long report prepared, but I started thinking about climbing Everest 8 times, and I'm just too tired now. Every time I've tried, the Khumbu Ice Fall has defeated me, so I give her a great deal of credit. We do need an executive session. I'm sorry, but we do need a brief executive session. And I may be asking you to take up a resolution afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Allaire. Any further questions for Mr. Allaire? No? Okay. Appointments. Appointments, we have one. Louise A. Saris to the Veterans Affairs Commission for a term ending 12/31/2020.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 17, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of the consent calendar.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. We have no communications, no petitions. We do have executive session, so make a motion to move into executive session.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We will be back.
What's that?
to make a motion to introduce a suspense item, resolution authorizing settlement of a claim.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Make a motion to adopt a resolution, be it authorizing settlement of claim, resolving that administration of the town of West Hartford is authorized to settle the case entitled Linda Gilknight versus West Hartford Board of Education, docket number HHD CV 16-60666541-S for the sum of $187,000 and 0 cents.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Oh, and we have one abstention. All those opposed? And with that, I would like to make a motion, motion passes, and I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Happy Passover and Easter.